Hello everyone, welcome to another one of these What I've Been Playing. I was looking for a shorter game to play, something like 10 hours or less that I could dig through in a week or so, and looking through our games, I stumbled upon The Order 1886, a game that my wife had played a few years ago and found fairly enjoyable, and I'd never checked out before. So I was like, yeah, I might as well check this out. Could be fun, and it's a very mixed, kind of frustrating experience because there are things about the Order 1886 that I found fascinating and enjoyable, and then some things I found frustrating, and even the things that were good ended up being a little frustrating. Again, I will avoid any major spoilers if you've not checked this out, because part of this is also a suggestion that you go and find this game and give it a shot, because it is something that is readily available and super cheap. It's like a $5-10 game. The Order 1886 takes place in an alternate reality Victorian era London, in a reality where there have been multiple different, especially Tesla-inspired technological advances, werewolves and vampires, and some magical elements with the Blackwater and stuff exist. So it's a very interesting setting. I enjoyed the setting. I enjoyed the depiction of that era with those elements worked into it to give it sort of a different flavor. And visually, from the technology standpoint rather than the artistic, I was actually pretty blown away with when this game came out for how old it is. A game that's just about a decade old. It looks, from a technical standpoint, outstanding. Like, it's crazy, especially if you're digging into the drive towards realism with graphics over any sort of real creative art style. That was done very, very well. I was very impressed with that, impressed with the animations, and that tied into its setting as well as the characters, who I also found very enjoyable. So from the standpoint of what it was doing with the quality of the visuals, outstanding. The overall narrative I found fascinating. I really enjoyed the characters. I was drawn in from that element, and that's kind of what kept me going through it, is that I was actually really loving the setting and the characters and the story and wanted to see what was happening next. Then the gameplay element I was a little more mixed on, so it was something that I was enjoying more experience and watching than playing. There are a variety of missions, a lot of kind of chasing down a subject, some stealth missions, and then the ones that are a little more shooting gallery. The elements that have you kind of chasing down a suspect or fighting off just a handful of werewolves or running through the underbellies of a flying machine, like, some of those were very interesting and tense, and I enjoyed them. These stealth missions, as you know if you watch any of these videos, I usually hate any kind of stealth missions, and here though, I didn't necessarily, like, I wasn't loving it because I don't like stealth stuff, but it was actually some of the, as far as, stealth missions go, some of the more enjoyable I've actually played in a long time. So I actually think I handled it very, very well. None of them were overly frustrating, none of them were overly long. I actually think it handled that well, and they all fit within the narrative. It made sense for them to be there. It wasn't just there for the sake of being there to add a stealth component to the game. So every different gameplay style felt appropriate narratively to the structure of the story and what was going on. Nothing kind of felt out of place or forced. I liked that. I was not a fan of the more intense shooting scenes, because it's something that I found with a lot of games, particularly the PS3, Xbox 360 generation, and into the early lifespan of games like this of the PS4, where a lot of adventure or action-based games will have spots where it makes sense, story-wise, that you would be gunning down a large force. You're outnumbered. It adds a sense of difficulty and tension, and it works. But then it's taken to a level of absurdity where it's like, what am I playing? Space Invaders? Just the endless waves of enemies, and I hate those. That's the main reason that I have not checked out the Uncharted games. I've watched my wife play a good deal of them, but those moments where you're one character, or maybe one character with one or two backup characters, and it makes sense where you encounter a force that maybe there are 10, 15 guys that you're fighting against, but it's just this endless wave of, like, it seems like 30 or 40 people, to where it takes me completely out of the story because it just seems absurd. And I just do not enjoy those. I don't like shooters usually, just in the general sense. There have been a few throughout the years that I have really enjoyed, usually a little more older first-person shooters. The kind of cover shooter, third-person, over-the-shoulder angle kind of action games, never been quite what I like, but if they're done really, really well, I get over that difference of taste and get into the style of the game, and that was not the experience I had here. Those portions, again, which are just small pieces of the overall game, every time we got to one of those extended shooting sequences where there's just an army of people, I really disliked it. And I was not a big fan of some of the mechanics within that portion of the story as well. Even though I loved the weapon variety, I just didn't enjoy the physical act of playing through, and would run into issues with the cover mechanic and something else where you would hit triangle to do a physical attack, and sometimes I'd be able to go kind of sneak around cover, get up to a guy, and do the physical attack to take them down, save some ammunition. The problem that I ran into, it had to have been probably 10 times throughout the course of the game, was that triangle is also the button to pick up ammunition or another weapon. And sometimes I'd sneak up to the guy, not in the stealth missions, but in more the action-based segments, and go to hit triangle to do the physical attack, and the guy happens to be standing right on top of a weapon or ammunition, so instead of doing the physical attack, he would bend down to pick up ammunition, or it would change out my weapon, and I got shot in the face. Little things like that could all have been improved with a sequel. And that is one thing, without spoiling what happens in the story at all, that was very disappointing about the game. Again, I knew going into it that it was a shorter game. It was shorter than I was expecting, though, and it's not a complete story. It is the first part of a story, is the setup. It wraps up the kind of like the first section of a novel with its, I think it was 17 chapters off the top of my head, just trying to remember. And so everything's so open-ended, there's very little that is wrapped up. Little portions in the storyline of some individual characters are wrapped up, but there's so much that is opened up and is beginning to be explored, setting up the next part of the game, and then it ends, and it ends very abruptly. It doesn't even feel like the end of this segment of the story until you get to the little epilogue post-credits. It feels just like the end of that chapter, and I was ready to move on to the next one, and suddenly the credits start rolling. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. And one other complaint that I didn't have, just because, again, this was a game that we've had and we paid very little for, but I could see that aspect, and then not getting a sequel was some of the negativity. And then it is short. I again, for just being a portion of the story and for the high quality that it was, I had no problem with the length of this game in itself. But there are a lot of chapters that really were just kind of watching, and I was enjoying the story, but I could see if you really wanted a little bit more meat out of the gameplay element, being disappointed. And so overall, it felt more like something that probably would have fared better as a TV series than a video game. Again, all the elements that would have been within a TV series were fantastic, and then all the elements that were strictly within the realm of video game felt a little more on the disappointing side and very brief. So it seemed like one of the games there was a drive to try and make games more and more cinematic, and I think one of the directions that you can go in the negative sense is to focus too much on making it feel like a cinematic experience and putting too little attention to the actual video game component. And that's kind of what felt like here. I actually had a really enjoyable experience overall, but again, I think I would have enjoyed it more as a show than a game. And getting to that abrupt ending, I'm kind of annoyed that there's not more. Like, I feel like a sequel, where the story was going and how it was going to expand, how it needed to expand, and what was hinted at, I think a second and possibly third game could have been fantastic and really could have fixed any little issues that this had. So it's frustrating in that sense, but it's still a game that I suggest you check out just because it's so easy to grab, and again is dirt cheap. So I think it's fun for that minimal barrier to entry to explore one time. I think it was like 7 hours, maybe 8 hours total that I played. Again, so an under 10-hour game. It was fun for what it was. It just kind of leaves you a little hollow at the end of the experience because of the elements that are missing, and we never really get to see the rest of the story.